Hi, my name is Marjanae Moore Roberts. I am the Chief Inclusion and Diversity Officer for Constituency Management Group, which is a division of Interpublic Group. I am so excited to join the One Club because I have the privilege and the pleasure of having a discussion with Carl Reed and David Steward to talk about the movie, the incredible movie they produced called Hair Love. And so they are joining me today via the new connection model of Zoom in this age of coronavirus. I want to ask each of them to introduce themselves and say a little bit about the companies they lead, and then we will get into a conversation about Hair Love. David, you want to start?
Sure. Hi, my name is David Steward II. I'm CEO of a group called Polarity, which encompasses Oni Lionforge Publishing Group, Magnetic Press, as well as, of course, Lionforge Animation.
Awesome. Carl?
I'm Carl Reed. I currently sit as president of Lionforge Animation and chief creative officer. And I've been with, I'm a co-founder of Lionforge Comics and been with the company from the beginning.
Awesome. So again, really excited to join you guys. I am sheltering in place in Brooklyn, New York. But you know, I want to have this conversation as if you and I, all the three of us, are all in the room together. So first of all, congratulations on Hair Love. It is done amazingly well. Obviously, it won an Academy Award. 30 million views on YouTube to date. Just an incredible amount of traction. And I watched it again last night and this morning, and at 7 minutes, it packs the punch of a lifetime. So thank you, first of all. But secondly, why don't you guys just tell us a little bit about how you got that project and how it fell into your lap and how you brought it to life, and tell us about your process.
Sure. Well, the project kind of came about it's kind of through relationships. I mean, Matthew had already, kind of started the project, doing a Kickstarter that, of course, everyone kind of knows about. It was very extremely successful Kickstarter. Kind of got the ball rolling on the publishing side, got the book out, of course, and was going into, beginning production on kind of this animated short. And the project came to us through kind of an older relationship that we have. So a gentleman does business development for us, Jimmy Thomas, was at a event and linked up with Karen Tolliver. And Karen's husband actually worked with Jimmy back in the day. And so they kind of reconnected, and, Karen was talking with him and said, I have this animation project. We're kind of stalled out. He said, because Sony doesn't really fund animated shorts at this point in time, but I have an option to, get it shown. If we can get the money together and get it produced together, do you know anyone that can step in and help us to produce this short? And so he's like, absolutely. I work with an animation studio. So we all kind of got together, and they kind of showed us some of the work that they had done and kind of laid it out. And quite honestly, I kind of, first time I looked at it, I was like, man, well, first of all, I kind of teared up a little bit, and this was kind of early phase. Now, mind you, with just,
Right.
A little bit of animatic and some other things, I'm like, whoa, I'm like, okay, this is powerful. And I also, and Carl can attest to this too, I said, you know what, this is going to win an Oscar. I said,
Wow, you knew that coming out of the gate.
Absolutely. I said it in that meeting. I said day one, I was like, this is awesome. And so I said, absolutely, we have to be a part of this. We have to do this project. Not only do we think it's going to be successful, but it's also for us, kind of the right thing to do. We need to have more things like this out in our community. This was a project that a lot of people don't know. That was, about, the African-American community, but was produced by the African-American community, and a lot of aspects of it. And I think a lot of people don't realize how many people behind the scenes were there that were African-American that were kind of part of that process. Of course, as Matthew's vision and driver, whom we saw in the press junket. You also saw Karen, who's also the executive that was, tasked with, getting it on screen for us and everything. But there was a host of different folks that were involved on that project. Some of them were, Everett Downing, Peter Ramsey, Bruce Smith. And these guys worked from everything from like Captain Underpants, Spider-Verse. I mean, Bruce Smith, created the Proud Family. Everybody knows
Wow.
that
Yeah.
from back.
Yeah.
So it
A
was kind of
favorite.
this great kind of coming together of all this great African American talent to produce this project, and we were excited to be a part of it.
And
Oh, that's
another thing,
amazing. Yeah. Go ahead, Carl.
as it kind of crossed our desks, we had been looking for a project that really epitomized what we stand for as a company, and I think no better project could have come across. So
Say more
it was,
about that. That sounds amazing. Dig into that for us.
yeah.
What that
So
means.
we started the company out in 2011. We were one of the only Black publishing companies, and we soon grew to be the largest Black-owned publishing company, and focusing on graphic novels and comic books. And we soon faced a lot of issues that come along with, being a kind of a Black face in a non-Black audience. And
Mm-hmm.
so we immediately then kind of dug our feet in the ground and said, hey, we're going to focus on making sure that the right voices are being seen, and that there's people working on these books that may not get the opportunity elsewhere, that we're showing characters that may not get the opportunity to be shown elsewhere. We want Black leads, we want Black creators, we want Black even down to inkers and colorists and people that
Mm-hmm.
letter the books. We want to make sure that these projects are representative of the world we live in, and in an authentic fashion. So driving that creative needs to be as authentic as just One Piece or throwing a Black character in. And so we believe that on the publishing side. And when we started the animation studio, we carried those same tenets over.
So curious if you guys can talk a little bit about what your process was to make sure that the authenticity that was, built and created within the original script, the original framework, the original sort of filming of the, animated product. How did you guys make sure that carried through your strategies for getting it out into the world?
Also, the one thing I would say, I mean, at the end of the day, while Sony distributed this project, this was an independent production. And really the buck kind of stopped with us at the end of the day, and with Matthew, and so it was everything, all the creative, kind of went through that channel. I mean, we checked in. We wanted to make sure that his vision was being realized. We wanted to make sure that the quality was there. We wanted to make sure everything was in line, but there wasn't any of this kind of upper office executive there to kind of weigh in and to say, well, this project's not moving forward because I feel that it needs this, or I feel it needs that, and I think by us coming in and kind of allowing that free flow process, you really got more of a singular vision coming from an authentic place.
Right.
I think often when these things kind of come through a studio process, you have so many layers of management along the way, and sometimes it's there to keep a project in check, but sometimes I feel that people weigh in or change things so that they can say that they did, so they can also
Trying to show value.
show value. It's like, I'm here, I have a job here, I better do something to show that I'm necessary. And I mean,
Right.
with this, everybody kind of checked your ego at the door. Is kind of reminds me of back in the day when they did We Are the World. I think that environment and being able to have that control, I think, is very important to kind of get that authenticity there. When you're asking for a studio, you're asking others for resources and things, that's when things can get a little muddled creatively, because they either have rights to, or feel that they need to weigh in to change the project.
Well, I know, Dave, at the beginning you talked about, you knew, so you saw it and knew it was going to be a hit. But when we talk about, and I love that, so again, thank you. But when you think about something as authentic as Hair Love, and for those who haven't seen it, it's a story about a really beautiful, simplistic story about a little girl who has to get her hair done, and her father is the person to help her get her hair done. And so, beautiful story, but hair, for Black folks in particular, you got to bring the authenticity. So
Oh, yeah.
what was the sort of process, how did you know it would be successful? Because in order to be authentic about hair, you got to go there. You got to talk about the curls and the kinks and the tangles. And, one of the things that we were exploring is authenticity the key to mass appeal? Or, how did you know in doing this film and producing it that you could get the broad appeal that you wanted, right? Or that Sony or, someone else might want, but still stay authentic? Like, how did those parts come together for you? Were you aware of it? Just talk about that piece of the process, because I think it's important for creatives to understand that.
Just looking at the project, it's got kind of layers, and it's got various entry points, I think, for people to kind of grasp onto. Being an African American, I mean, it's kind of an automatic, kind of tie-in, because we're seeing, two Black characters on screen. We also then it kind of goes into layers there, right? So, while I don't have any daughters myself, Carl does. Carl kind of really relates to kind of the situation.
Yeah, I live Hair Love every day.
Oh, so there you go. That's the tie-in. You have to live the experience.
Carl can name the texture of his daughter's hair and everything. I mean, he's all in.
So, like coconut oil right now if you were in the room.
Oh, wow. Okay. There you go.
So, but I do relate, because I had a sister, and I remember, growing up, and my mom doing her hair, pulling out the hot comb and everything else, and I was like, and watching it, I was like, man, I'm glad I'm a dude. Sit there and watch her, go through that whole process. I was like, man, so I could relate to that.
Struggle is real.
It's real. So, so there's that part of it, but then you realize, why she's doing it, because her mom is coming out of the hospital from cancer, and she doesn't have hair, and you kind of see that dimension there. And I think that's the point when I really kind of got choked up. I'm getting chills right now, just kind of thinking.
Well, I didn't want to tell the end for those who haven't seen it, but yeah, it was, your heart is sitting beside you when you're done with that movie. It's just such a beautiful story.
Absolutely. So you kind of go through these kind of layers, and and kind of looking at it, like I said, it's made me emote. Like I said, it almost kind of made me really tear up and stuff. And even watching it subsequently as it was going through the process, even the completed product. Even now, I'm kind of whenever I watch, I'm just like, oh, here comes that one part I need to turn away. So, for an animation to kind of have that kind of heart and soul, I think is really dynamic, so I felt like, we really succeeded, in doing that. But also as the ball was rolling, we kind of got, along the way, I felt like we got some verification from different people, so people were seeing it. So I had a Jewish woman that has really curly hair, looked at the project, and she was like, oh man, I can relate, because I have curly hair too. I understand. I talked to someone that had a best friend of hers who was a mother that had passed away from cancer, and she had another relation point, and again, non-Black, and so there were different kind of these entry points, but also, I think the authenticity there and kind of showcasing that also kind of let people experience Black culture in a real and meaningful way, which I think is very important, because you see the father-daughter dynamic there. You see kind of the what people were wearing, what they were doing, and all the rest of that stuff. I think it really socializes it. I think that's very important. I think too often, again, when you have a situation where you have powers that be or executives that are involved with a project that aren't of that particular group, whether it's African American, Asian, Latino, whatever, you know, trying to then, you know, figure out, well, I need to do this because I think it needs to be, you know, this way for the audience, or this group, I think of this group this way. And so they're putting their own biases, you know, into things. I think that really, you know, stigmatizes and ends up watering down the experience. So, you know, I think giving that authentic experience is very important so that we can really connect with one another in a meaningful way.
You know, I want to talk a little bit more about how you all got into the industry, because I think that's going to be really important for the One Club community. But, you know, one of the things that struck me is it is a story about a father trying to do his daughter's hair, but it's about so much more. It's about what I saw as his commitment. Like, I love that early scene where he grabs the hair and then he finds himself in the boxing ring, like trying to wrangle the hair. And he's like, I'm out, put this hat on, and that's it. And then she's like, get back in here. And that just the commitment between the two of them, right, to get it right, his commitment to being a father and just showing his dedication to his little girl, his dedication to his family. All of that just goes such a long way to sort of debunk a traditional sort of trope or archetypes that we see in film, live action film for sure, you know, perhaps not as much in animation, but all of these stories, when we have these nuanced approaches I'm talking as a diversity practitioner now and as a Black woman and mother, it's really important to be able to debunk these traditional sort of single, you know, monolithic ideas of what it is to be a Black man, of what it is to be a Black father, of what it is to have hair that you actually have to love enough to work through. So it's such an important story. And I think that, you know, the world is lucky that you all made it. And, you know, from a very personal level, I think it's a beautiful opportunity for us to reframe all of that fatherhood, tattoos, hair, love, dedication. So it has so much that you can pack into that. If folks haven't seen it, log on to YouTube, Hair Love, full, the best 7 minutes of your weekend. Start your weekend with it. But I do, if it's okay with you guys, want to switch a little bit to how you guys got into the industry.
I've known Dave since 2002, I think, and we had a creative agency here in St. Louis, and we worked that for a number of years. And then Dave had an opportunity to produce some films in LA, so we moved out to LA. I followed suit a little bit later to get into broadcast animation, and so we did a stint in LA. He wound up moving into private equity, and I found myself moving back. I had a kid and I wanted to come back to the Midwest. And so we found ourselves back in the Midwest at around the same time looking for what's next. And we decided, let's dive into comics. And so at that time, you know, we had a lot of assumptions. Digital was transforming music and movies at the time. And it was expected to do the same to publishing. And, you know, ebooks have been going crazy. But we learned really quickly that comics is a very protective market, and retailers won't necessarily support a printed book if you go digital first, for instance. And so we quickly had to build up an infrastructure to go print first in order to have a business to continue our mission. And so, Dave, I don't know if you want to expand on that.
You know, we needed to build a print infrastructure there, so we did. And started that process around 2012, 2013, and then, you know, started, you know, kind of growing and expanding. I mean, our first, when you talk about kind of the trials and tribulations along the way, you know, we had a couple, you know, kind of interesting kind of points in our career, and kind of getting that whole thing started was, you know, initially when we first started, I mean, we went around to the various, you know, Comic-Cons, and we were starting the company up and everything else, and we're looking for people to work with us. And so we'd go around and talk to different artists and stuff like that and say, hey, you know, we have these books that we're looking to produce. You know, we have some concepts. We'd like you to come on board, you know, and I understand we're a new company, so, you know, if you're worried about getting paid, we'll pay you half up front, you know. you know, we'll work it out. And I tell you, time after time after time, you know, people were like, no, I can't, or they'd make up an excuse and say they're exclusive. It was just, you know, and I was just kind of like, my jaw was open half the time. I'm like, really? You know? And so,
Wow.
you know, we ended up being in a panel and came across this guy. His name's Brandon Easton. And he was a writer, and he, you know, stood up during the panel and asked a question. And in the process, you know, he was saying how he was writing for the Thundercats at the time, the last iteration of it. And we're like, oh man, we need to talk to the guy. So after the panel, I went up and talked to him. I said, hey, you know, I kind of gave him a whole spiel. I said, you know, love to, you know, work with you. And he's like, yeah, let me know, you know. And so, you know, we got back to the office. You know, literally, he was the first person that was willing to work with us. And so
Wow.
we kind of got things started there. And then the next year,
He became kind of an evangelist too. He
oh
started
yeah,
bringing in a lot of the other writers and artists that we started
yeah.
working with, because we all shared that similar vision.
Yeah. Great. Yeah.
And then we so we got the license for that really I think set us on the map. We got this license with NBC Universal, so we had the rights to produce Airwolf, Saved by the Bell, Punky Brewster, Miami Vice, and Knight Rider. And so that was really kind of the point where everything kind of exploded. Now, you know, people know Lion Forge Comics a lot better, but you know, back 10 years ago, they were like, who are you guys? You know? And so, and which goes back to the whole thing about, you know, even getting creators to work with you. And so, so getting creators to work with you, getting stores to, and retailers to pick you up too, was very challenging. And so if you don't have anything, if you have something brand new and you're a brand new company, it's very hard to get the buzz you need for people to be willing to take the chance to pick up your product into stores and get it marketed. I mean, this kind of goes to anything that you're packaging. You know, if everything in the package is new, people don't know exactly what they're going to get. And when it comes to creative in particular, people aren't willing to make judgment calls based off of the content itself. They need something else to have some sort of a surety that they're going to get something good. It's kind of weird, okay? And so you see
So
this
they want
happen.
a proven product up
Right.
front just to get you in the door, and then they'll listen for the next phase.
Right. Or some element of it proven. So, you know, if let's say I had a new product and I have a known creator, you know, attached to it, or a known writer or a known artist, then people are willing to buy in. In this case, you know, we're using the brands, you know, that you know, you know, and
Yeah, popular brand.
and using that to as the hook to, you know, show them what we can do creatively. And once we've kind of established that, then we can move on to, okay, well, you know us from Knight Rider, right? And what we did there, here's this new property that I can now introduce you to that you're willing to buy.
If you think about your portfolio as a whole, like how do you think about, it sounds like there's some diversification in there, right? So how do you think about what percentage makes sense to be in the comic book versus animated series versus, you know, animated shorts, animated full feature? How do you think about original content versus licensed content? Like, what do you think from a business perspective, right? For people who are really thinking about a career in the creative arts, how do you think about your portfolio in terms of a mix? What's optimal and what's worked best for you all?
For us, it was always, to your point about a mix, every company is going to be a little bit different in terms of what they're comfortable with. Some companies are a little bit more leaning on the license side because they want more of a, and quote unquote guaranteed revenue stream, and they've kind of figured that whole thing out in their light on the creative. But what that does is it creates, in my opinion, kind of yes, you'll have short-term kind of revenue streams. What are you doing out for the long term? Because those licenses only have terms, so we no longer have a license to those properties that we once did. You know, we had it for, I think it was a 4-year license term. 3 or 4 year license term. So we did what we did, and we kind of let it go. So you have those periods of time in order to exploit it, right? Now, when it's your own property, you have the lifetime to exploit it. So take Robert Kirkman with The Walking Dead. I mean, he created that, and he's able to exploit that thing, forever, right? And
In
so, but
perpetuity.
again, there's risks though associated with new properties. For every Walking Dead, there's The Walking Mile or whatever else
Right.
that might be out there that wasn't successful. So you kind of take you have to kind of balance what you're comfortable with, risk reward side. And I think when we were before we did the merger, when we acquired Oni Press about middle of last year, we merged the companies together. So we were, I think, at about maybe an 80-20 mix or 70-30 mix when it came to original versus licensed and non-owned creative. So that was kind of
and that 80% was original.
Yeah, 80%
Oh,
was
wow.
original.
Okay. I want to ask you a few questions about just advice for some of the people who may be watching our session. But before we do that, any projects that you guys are working on, live action, anything that you want to sort of talk about a little bit before we move on to the advice section of our talk?
We have a series of films and TV shows that we're currently working on. We have a Afro fantasy princess film that we're currently creating, and it's very close to us, and it's focused on actual African American culture, which is
Nice.
and it dives deeper into those aspects of where it comes from and where it stops. And then it dives into its origins in mainland Africa.
Okay.
And so all this wrapped around a nice little princess fairy tale. But we have stories like that, but then we have some more action-packed or adult content. Like we have a project called Quantum University that is, it's like Doctor Who or a sci-fi show set at a HBCU. And so it has that deep sci-fi elements set in an environment that that it has never been seen at it before. So.
Wow. Awesome. Well, that one I can't wait to see. Just a couple of questions. These are questions that we think will help the folks on the call. So you guys probably know the stats better than us, but there was a study at USC. It said only about 3% of animated film directors are women, only 1% women of color. So how do we get more of those communities and more of those perspectives into our, we need to get it across the board, but specifically into our animated films and the work that you all are doing?
We're trying to take on a lot of their responsibility. We're currently in the project I mentioned before, Eris. We're currently either trying to cultivate or find the appropriate director who's Black female animation director. I think it's important for the project that we do have that. And we're willing to take a little bit more time to make sure that that happens. And I think as we go along, having that in the forefront of our decision making, and when we're placed in a position of power where we can choose those seats, it won't always, be appropriate, but wherever possible to make that effort to ensure that we're being as inclusive and as direct with the authenticity as possible. So for instance, Superb, we did a comic in our superhero universe called Superb, and it featured the first Down syndrome superhero star of a comic book. Dave, you want to talk about that? I know we partnered with we didn't have anyone on the staff that had Down syndrome, and so we didn't quite feel like we could tell that story the best way.
Right, and so we actually, one of the writers had worked with kids with Down syndrome. We also partnered with the National Down Syndrome Association up in New York as well, and ran scripts and ideas and things by that group. just to make sure that we were had the appropriate representation, installed. But to Carl's earlier point, being an African American owned company and owned animation studio, it's important to us to bring along kind of that next generation and foster opportunities where we can and take more risk than others might in those situations to give those opportunities. I think when you kind of give those stats, in terms of 3% of directors, are African American female, I think in the animation industry is like 0, and that's why we're having to do what we're willing to do to create one. But once we do that, we need to make sure that we can duplicate that process. We need to make sure that whomever we do give an opportunity like that, that they're bringing along someone else as well and having
I
that
love
multiplier.
that.
I think it's incumbent upon all of us, once we gotten to a certain position, to work and try to bring along someone else. That's the only way we're going to really enumerate and have more persons of color behind the scenes.
No, I think that's critical. And so to the extent with that, we're talking to diverse creatives, and the One Club for Creativity has given us this platform. What's your advice for folks who are trying to sort of figure out their path? How do they get started? How do they stay motivated? How do they get their ideas seen? Like what was some of the advice that inspired you and helped you along the way? Talk to the people.
We live in a very unique time right now. Like you're able to create content and get it out to millions of people with no permission. So through YouTube, through social media, you're able to create content today at your current level where you are and get it out there, and you'll get some harsh criticism, you'll get some constructive criticism, and you'll grow. And you also build a fan base. You'll also have interaction with those with the people that see your content. You no longer have to wait on everyone. If you feel like you have a story to tell, if you feel like you have a talent that you want to demonstrate, you need to go straight to the source right now. And to be honest, we can't identify people if we don't know they exist. So the more we see content out and about, if you put up a web comic, if you put up some animated shorts on YouTube, that exposes us and other people that are looking for diverse creators to the possibilities that might exist out there.
Awesome. Dave,
I would say, there's kind of multiple things kind of involved in that. Is that one, investing yourself, investing your talents, and what I mean that is, investing your talents to make sure that you're performing at the top of your skill level creatively, whatever that is. If you're an artist, making sure that you're, one of the top artists. Get whatever education, get whatever internships or study that you can get, so that you fully understand, kind of the industry that you're getting into, the ins and outs, what's considered quality, not quality, and so on and so forth. And then the second part of that is invest in your content, your ability, and because to Carl's point earlier, we're in a time now where the doors are kind of wide open when it comes to distribution. I mean, YouTube alone allows you to put up content for free. And so, gathering whatever resources you have and going ahead and putting something together. I mean, we've seen some pretty amazing projects that were homegrown that, were shot for very little money. We've seen, people pull together, animation that was amazing for very little money. So it's not necessarily a money thing if you have the creative capabilities and you have the ability to work with one another in partnership to create something to get your name and get yourself out there. And those things can become kind of the launching pad, your calling card for getting into some of the doors that you may want to at, whether it's you want to work for a company or you want to, put a project out there, you need to have something, at that level that, can be seen. I mean, we find people all the time, via those kind of methods. It's like, man, look at that, thing. We're like, man, we got to talk to those guys. What can we do with
Instagram
them?
post.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that Dave, you just mentioned, it reminded me real quickly, we're almost out of time, but it reminded me that there are many ways to participate in this industry. We talked about a lot of people want to be in front, quote unquote, in front of the camera, directly behind the camera, but it's a broad set, of options to be involved in this part of the business. What's some other ways for people to get involved? I mean, these are creatives, but they're, you still need you need a whole bunch of other people too, right?
Oh yeah, it's a whole skill set in, and Carl can kind of go through it. I mean, it's not just the person kind of putting pen to paper, but it's all the behind the scenes work, the script, the editing, the music, the casting, the all those elements. Also too, we need more, especially persons of color doing financing, in the industry as well. That's a huge part. I mean, again,
get paid,
when we talk about wanting to have more content and more control of our content, we need the financing mechanisms and a firm understanding of how those things work from a financing and producing side of things, to make projects go as well, which is very important. Carl, you want to?
Well, to build off of what Dave is saying, you'll never see any movie if there's no money to make it. And so some producer has pulled together those finances in some way. And in every producer will tell you that it's an uphill battle. But from a animation and filmmaking and entertainment, you can come in on the legal side. You can be a lawyer focused on entertainment, and you can specialize on animation. You can specialize in comics specifically. On the art side, there used to be this myth of the starving artist. There are fine artists, but from a production art standpoint, it's people that just do backgrounds. There's people that just do characters. There's people that just do vehicles. There's people that program the software that people use to create the animation. So it's not whether you have a good voice for being a voiceover actor or whether you can draw. If you feel strongly about being a part of the industry, and pretty much every industry, there's a way to participate at a very high level.
Wow, that's amazing. So there's so many different ways to get involved, and I'm just so grateful for the work that you guys are doing. I'm sure the people on the phone are too. And I'll end on this, if you'll allow me. I think we need to start cultivating our pipelines earlier and earlier. Are you guys doing anything for children, or what would you recommend for the young generation, or for the people on the call, the people who are listening today? How can they activate the generation coming behind them? Because that's a really important part of this discussion.
Well, funny you bring that up. We actually, I think we're running 2 years now, Carl. Our program with
I think
Jennings.
We're about 5 years in now.
Catch up, Dave.
Time flies when you're having fun. What can So we actually implemented a program with a school up in what we call North County, St. Louis, Jennings school system, and it was actually a interesting story if you look at the school and kind of the turnaround that's happened there over the last few years. So school was turned around from I think a 60% graduation rate to 100% graduation rate. And so we came in and talked with the school superintendent there, and said, hey, and he's always looking for like new things to expose the students to. I said, hey, we can do something with comics and animation. So we sent a couple of our guys over, and been teaching the students 1 semester of comic creation and 1 semester of animation. And actually they worked out with one of the local community colleges here to give the students credit. And I think it's the first program of its type in America at the high school level where students are able to get their hands on and produce in those particular fields.
I love it. Well, there you go. And everybody, I love that program, and we should blow that up. Let's figure out how we can get it in Brooklyn, because we need it here too. But
Absolutely.
thank you guys so much. And I can't imagine that there wasn't just the people on the phone leave here uninspired. I'm just so thankful for the work you're doing.
Thank
Best
you.
of luck to you guys. Take care.
Thank you.